I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. It's ice hockey season. How do I know this? Because a recent blog in the New York Times presents the extremely unusual competition of the creator, the writer of New York Times crossword puzzles, Patrick Merrell, who is also a blogger on crossword puzzles for the New York Times, traveling to the New York Islanders, to the Nassau Coliseum, to face off, crossword off, with the team captain, Doug Waite, and defenseman Jack Hillen and Andrew McDonald. Patrick, this seems very bold of you, two defensemen and the captain against you. It's 3-1. How do you do a crossword face-off? What are the rules?
Well, there are a few competitions during the year. This isn't something I go around and do all the time. But there are competitions, and it's pretty much you get the puzzle, start the clock, and see who can solve it the fastest. That's the way we handle this competition.
So they hand out crossword puzzles that no one's ever seen, and there's a timer, and you all work at the same table or in different rooms? Are you blinded from each other?
Well, they have the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament takes place in Brooklyn every winter, and it gets from, I think it's up to about 700 competitors now, so it fills an entire ballroom.
And it's about time or accuracy or both?
Yeah.
How is it weighted after you turn it in?
Well, accuracy is very important.
Right.
If you make a mistake, it's the equivalent of 8 minutes of solving time. But then the fastest solver who is correct is on all the puzzles is the person that wins.
And if you leave one blank or two blanks, does that count 8 minutes or more?
Yeah, well, leaving one square blank as opposed to solving correctly, it's equivalent to about 8 minutes.
8 minutes. So an error is 8 minutes, a blank or a series of blanks, because they're all interweaved, is 8 minutes, and then you tally up at the end when the last person turns it in. That's when you do the scoring.
Yes.
Okay. These three young men, Doug Waite, Jack Hillen, and Andrew McDonald, are they calm and collected about this, or do they grit their teeth and get out there with, like hockey players?
They've never been in a competition before, and frankly, I don't really get involved in competitions very much. But we thought it would be fun for the three of them and myself to face off and do a puzzle, a Monday puzzle, which is the easiest of the week. The puzzles get harder in the New York Times as the week progresses. And so I picked out an old puzzle that I wasn't familiar with, and we solved against the clock, against each other. This
puzzle was from 1999, I believe, maybe earlier, by Fred Piscop for the New York Times. One more detail about how people approach this when they're doing a puzzle or when these young men do it. Do they do them often? Do they practice? Do they brag about how often they do them?
Well, they told me that they solve very often. They solve most days. I think many of the puzzles they do are from USA Today. And also they have downtime before a game, and often they'll do crossword puzzles to relax before a game.
So they're not actually in there thinking about the opposing team or how they're going to perform that night. They're in there with a New York Times or the USA Today on their knees. That's what they're doing.
Yes, they use, that's their preparation, is using the New York Times puzzle to relax them before a game.
I'm not sure that this would be good advertisement if it gets out generally that the National Hockey League has men who are literate and careful and studious about, you expect them to be in there eating glass or something like that.
Well, I guess they have to give their mind a little exercise now and then, too, so.
All right, let's plunge into the puzzle. As you approach this and how you did it. So everybody was handed out, and this had a hockey theme. That's the one you chose for them. Did that make them happy, or were they disgruntled about that?
Actually, it didn't have a hockey theme to it. I kind of chose it blindly because I couldn't look at the puzzle beforehand. Otherwise, I might have seen some of the answers.
Sure.
As I say, I picked a Monday puzzle, so it would be fairly easy. And I also picked it, I knew Fred Piscop, who wrote the puzzle, lives just a few miles away from Nassau Coliseum, so I thought it would be nice to have a local puzzle author represented.
And how did it go with them? Were they excited about it? Is there any inside baseball, any inside hockey from how the game performed?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I tell a little bit, of very few details about it in the New York Times blog, but then you can watch the video. But one thing that didn't make it in is I actually left a square blank in the puzzle and finished well ahead of them. But as I've told you previously, that a blank square is worth about 8 minutes. So if they could have solved the puzzle within 8 minutes, which they weren't able to do, unfortunately, they would have won. Given the fact that this was a friendly competition, I figured that kind of made it a draw, the fact that they solved the puzzle correctly versus my solving much quicker, but having a blank square.
Now, we know that these are competitive young men, and they've probably been seething about it ever since, Patrick. So
yes.
As we go into it here, did they afterwards, and, the post-game interview, you talked to the coaches and the team after the loss, and everybody's a little downtrodden. Were they discouraged? Did they learn from it? Are they eager to come back? I mean, is this now going to become a feature at the New York Islanders?
I don't know. Maybe they'll go into training and we'll have a rematch. Maybe they'll send some of their enforcer after me ahead of time to kind of soften me up so I'm not solving so quickly. We'll have to see what develops.
All right, we have some and Patrick Merrell does a blog as well as create puzzles for the New York Times, and he has hockey in the New York Times crossword, some recent clues. So let's go through these. I do not do puzzles, Patrick. I approach this as an amateur savage, you understand. But
okay.
When I read them, I get rink fake out, 4 letters.
Mm-hmm.
That should be easy for everyone who knows these things. Hockey no-no, 5 letters, but not when shorthanded. What are the clues that are given afterwards? Is that routine for a regular for a regular crossword that you give clues after you give the clue?
No, I just gave a little more information in some of the clues, because in a crossword you have the crossing words which will give you some of the letters which help you out to figure out what the answer is. If you see a clue like hockey no-no and you just know it's 5 letters, you might not know what the answer is. So I added in some extra hints.
Okay.
On some of them.
And the blog for this has a lot of other clues if you want to challenge. Patrick, what did you learn from this about hockey players? That they've broken the template here, that they're actually quite thoughtful and studious, or they just thought the thrill of being videotaped doing a crossword with the New York Times was just a lifetime experience?
Well, I think what it shows in general is that there are people that solve crossword puzzles from every walk of life. There are hockey players, many players in sports, not the whole team, obviously, but baseball players, football players, sewer workers, doctors, lawyers. It's just about every profession you can imagine that has people solving crossword puzzles.
And can you recognize them when you meet them on the street? Do they
No.
have letters on their foreheads, or is there anything that gives it away?
A little ink from the newspaper on the side of their hand, maybe.
Oh, that's the Sherlock Holmes method. Yeah,
yes,
that's what. Yeah, he would pick that up immediately.
Yeah.
Just back from Afghanistan doing the New York Times crossword puzzle. I understand exactly.
Right.
Patrick Merrell, who creates crosswords for the New York Times and blogs on crosswords for the New York Times. The Times versus the Islanders. Times wins the first match. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show.